Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today we're going to be talking about accuracy, as you can probably tell, and we're going to be talking about accuracy out of my Bushmaster ACR DMR version. So the DMR version, just to really quickly go over the specs, it's going to have the 18.5 heavy barrel. It's a hammer forged heavy barrel, 1 in 7 twist. So really good velocities out of a 5.56/223. Very, very heavy profile. The barrel assembly by itself weighs 3.2 pounds, I want to say. Very, very heavy. The trigger that we have on here, because this is also important, the trigger that we have on here is the Geissele Super ACR, which is a really good trigger, though I do have some issues with it that we'll talk about later. Basically, the Geissele trigger replaces the Mil-Spec trigger that's in here. The Mil-Spec trigger that these guys come with are generally on the heavier side, but this guy here has about a 2-pound first stage and about a 2.5-pound let off, and so it's very, very crisp and very controllable. So when you're going for groups at long range, 100 yards, whatever you're doing, very, very easy to get good crisp trigger pulls. Next up on here that you'll probably notice is we have a ACR to M4 adapter. So this is actually custom made by a guy on the ACR forum who actually makes these. So these are custom machined, they're machined out of aluminum, and we have a UTG commercial spec stock, an S1, which is my favorite stock. It gives you an excellent amount of cheek weld on here, and it's buttery smooth on the stock, so there's almost no wiggle in it whatsoever. There's more wiggle between the upper and lower receiver than there is on the actual stock itself, which is awesome. Makes for really good long range shooting. Moving forward on here, something that I will like to change, and I actually have a couple different ones on the way, is this front rail. This front rail, I actually sold the original tri-rail that comes with it just because it's really heavy and it's really bulky, and so I don't like it at all. It's also the shortest, so I think it's the shortest and heaviest rail you can buy. So I replaced it with this guy. I picked this guy off the ACR forum for like 40 bucks. It's actually like an IPC or IPS airsoft aluminum rail, but it is the lightest rail you can buy for an ACR. And to mount it, instead of using the trunnion on your barrel nut or the barrel trunnion, I actually use the actual upper receiver. So it's actually bolted into the upper receiver, so nothing is actually touching the barrel nut except for, of course, the upper receiver that it's mounted into. So in terms of accuracy, that should be helping it out the most. But in the future, I do want a longer rail on here just because it is the DMR version, and I want something that allows me to have a little bit longer of a fulcrum point, which means a little bit more stable shooting. One thing that people might give me crap for is this optic. This is a 4-16 optic by Vism. This is their shooter series. It's their newest scope, I believe. It's actually fairly decent. The glass quality on it is firmly in the good category. It's not great, but at 100 yards, I can definitely tell where my groups are. I can watch my shots impact. It's a 30mm tube mounted on here. Now, this is not the optic that's going to be on this weapon. This is just my accuracy testing optic. So when I'm doing accuracy testing on any of my other guns, this is what I'm going to throw on it. So this does not live on this gun. It is just currently on here because it's what I use for the accuracy testing. Has a really big parallax wheel on the side here, which is fairly decent. It's fairly precise, actually, which is very important. One thing to note is that it's very, very finicky, though. So when you're at 100 or 300 yards, like I took this guy out to, you got to really kind of fine tune it to get the picture as focused as possible, and that's just going to happen when you have lower glass quality. For this intended purpose of making very little holes in paper, it works great. No, it's not the most durable optic in the world, but this literally just stays in a bag or on a gun until it goes to the range to sit down and lay some groups. So let's go ahead and talk about the actual accuracy of this guy. Now, I brought a bunch of different ammunition with me out there. I think I brought 5 or 6 different types in total, ranging from Tula all the way up to Hornady Black 75 grain. Now, most of the ammunition that I brought, though, was not a precision load. The only 2 real precision loads that I brought were ADI 69 grain Sierra Match King, which has been my most accurate load out of all of my AR-15s. But we had some unfortunate issues with the first set of groups that I shot, so I'll go ahead and show you these now. The first group that I shot, was this Federal bulk pack. Now this is high, impacting high at 100 yards because I have it zeroed at 50. So it's a couple inches high, it's perfectly zeroed. The issue with the group that I have was that it was just over 3.5 inches with just Federal bulk pack 223 ammunition. Now 3.5 inches or 3.5 MOA, I'm gonna kind of use those interchangeably even though they're not exactly the same, so kind of bear with me on that. 3.5 MOA out of just decent brass ammunition is really poor, and so I was starting to see some issues with this first set of groups. So after that, I went ahead and I shot some Hornady Black 75 grain. Now this is really good ammunition. It's not necessarily the best match ammunition out there, but it performs really, really well in everything I've tested it. So I shot a couple of 5-round groups. Now the first 5-round group that I shot out of it was fairly respectable, although not perfect. It was about 1 5/8 inches or 1.625 inches. Pretty good for 100 yards, 5-round group, but not quite what I was expecting out of something that's a DMR and should have very good accuracy. It's a very high quality, heavy barrel, 18.5 inches, so I was expecting fairly decent accuracy out of it. Next I shot another group of it because I actually brought like 40 or a couple boxes of the Hornady Black, so I was going to shoot a bunch of groups with it to see if it really liked that ammo, because I can pick it up for about 14 bucks a box, which is a pretty good price for match ammunition. Next up, so I shot a 1 1/4 inch group, just under an 1 1/4 inch group at 100 yards, 5-round group again, so it's pretty good, fairly respectable. And then I shot a group of the 69 grain Sierra Match King. Now unfortunately the 69 grain Sierra Match King had a huge point of impact shift, just because of the different types of ammunition. It's a different manufacturer, that sort of thing. And so unfortunately I only got 3 rounds on paper up here in the top left corner, because here's my point of aim, and then of course point of impact shifted about 4 inches up and left. So the issue with that is I only got 3 of them on paper, and the rounds that I did get on paper were very poor. They were about a 3-inch group, just under a 3-inch group, with the 3 rounds that actually did manage to make it on paper. And so at this point I was noticing that this shouldn't be happening, and there's some definite issues going on here. So I did shoot another group of Arms Core 62 grain FMJ. It's just a fairly cheap load you can find for about $7 or $8 a box, generally speaking, if you find it in a store. And it printed a group of just over 3.5 inches. So at this point, this is the first paper that I had, I was noticing some very large issues, and I didn't like the way it was printing, and I thought that I could definitely do better. So I went ahead and I was going to retest all of the loads, just because I didn't like the performance that I was getting out of it, and so I retightened the barrel. So I took the barrel off during a cool down session on the range, because at the range I was at, you know, they have a cool down session where you wait, people readjust their targets, all that sort of good stuff. So at this point the barrel was now cool, so I had taken it out and readjusted it, made sure that it was as tight as possible. And so what had probably happened was when I put it in the last time, I probably just did not tighten it down properly or all the way. I have not had any issues with it loosening on me, so that would be the first time if it actually did loosen on me, but I believe that I just put it in incorrectly or not tight enough. So then off of a cold bore, I fired 1 round to verify 0 of Hornady Black 75 grain at 50 yards, just to verify that 0 was still good at 50 yards. And then I went ahead and shot 2 more groups with the Hornady Black 75 grain. That was the best load I had out with me, because I only brought 5 rounds of the 69 grain Sierra Match King, and because I wasted it when the barrel was not completely tightened down, I couldn't really test how well or how accurate that load was. But as you'll see in just a second, the next 2 groups are quite spectacular. So the next group that I laid down was just over a 1/2 inch. It was about 5/8 of an inch, a full round group, because remember I shot 1 round at 50 yards. So it was a 4-round group at 100 yards of just over a 1/2 inch. They're pretty much all touching. A very, very good group. The best 4-round group that I've probably ever gotten, with a 5.56. Very, very good, very impressive. And then I went ahead and I shot back to back. So I was like, hey, can I do that again? So then I went ahead and shot a second 5-round group, this time at the bottom left target down here. And it still printed at a little bit under an inch, about 7/8 of an inch, for a 5-round group at 100 yards. That is very, very, very respectable accuracy, and definitely sub MOA with Hornady Black 75 grain. Now, Hornady Black 75 grain is not necessarily the best match ammo out there. There is better loads, and there might be better loads that this specific gun likes more. So I will be testing it with other loads, but the fact of the matter is, Hornady Black, I have access to it. I can buy it locally for about 14 bucks a box. And for the accuracy that I'm getting out of it, that is very, very good. And actually, also impressively, I also shot a 1.5 inch group with Tula 55 grain, which is very impressive. That ammunition is generally fairly terrible and fairly inconsistent, but I did shoot a 5-round group at 1.5 inch, very lucky. And then I went ahead and I kind of did a round robin of all the different rounds, just to kind of verify that you know, it wasn't a fluke and it was still holding 0. My next group was with Hornady Black 75 grain. The barrel is much hotter at this point. Shot a 5-round group of just under 1.5 inches, which is still very good. If I can get in the 1.5 to inch range, I'm always very happy with that, because I'm not shooting out to 500, 600 yards with my guns most of the time, and so inch and a half accuracy is very good. But as we noted before, with a cold barrel and a very heavy barrel at that, it can hold sub MOA for multiple 5-round groups, which is excellent. So then I went ahead and did a round robin of some of the more garbage ammo. So the next Tula group that I shot was just Tula 55 grain. I shot a little bit under 3 inches. We have a Federal bulk pack that again shot just under 3 inches, which is kind of where I expect it to be. I'd like to see that down around 2 MOA for bulk ammunition, but beggars can't be choosers. It really did not like the Arms Corps 62 grain stuff, so it shot that right at about 4 inches, and then the American Eagle was a little bit under 3 inches. So overall, the accuracy with cheap kind of surplus ammo is fairly mediocre. I was looking at mostly 2 to about 4 MOA with crappy ammunition. That being said, I really didn't test any high quality Mil-Spec loads like a XM193 or A55 or something like that. So I might get a little bit better accuracy out of a little bit higher quality Mil-Spec ammunition. But what I was getting out of there with the really nice ammunition was very, very impressive. So sub MOA with Hornady Black 75 grain is more than enough for what I need. And they do have a 300 yard range there. So I went ahead and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead, take this guy out to 300 yards and see what I can do for 300 yards. Now, I did need to find out where it was actually hitting at 300 yards. So I have a few shots up here in the top corner here, but my point of aim was right here with the first hash mark, which was actually good as well, because then I found out that the first hash mark on there with the 75 grain stuff is actually about 250, 275 yards, somewhere in that range, because it shot just a little low at 300 yards. So using that first hash mark on the scope, which I think is like a 4 MOA or 3 MOA, something like that, drop on there, and I put a 5.5 inch group at 300 yards. Now, at 300 yards, there's a lot more of me coming into the group than the gun. So for instance, at 300 yards, my stability is much more of an issue than the guns. So at this group, that's a 1.8 MOA at 300 yards, which I am more than happy with. Sub 2 MOA for 300 yards is decent. And again, that's more me in the gun than the actual gun itself. So overall, I would say with excellent ammunition, the accuracy that you get out of this guy is excellent. So it is actually now the most accurate 5.56 platform gun that I own, which is awesome, even though it does have a quick swap barrel feature on it and it's not like locked down like an AR-15. This guy here is more accurate than any of my AR-15s, and most of my AR-15s are about 1 to 1.5 MOA, which is very, very good. Now, that being said, with mediocre ammo, you're going to get mediocre results. So if you're really looking for precision shooting, and if you're shooting long range, you're probably going to be using a hotter, more precision load anyways, so it's not going to be that big of a deal. Find a load that really works well for you. I did want to try out some other loads with it, for instance, like 77 grain Sierra Match King from IMI or somebody like that, and try and get some really good precision loads through this guy. Now, if you're hand loading, your accuracy is probably going to be amazing, but I don't do that, and even with factory loads, with high quality factory loads, you're printing sub MOA most of the time. Now, something that I did want to mention with this guy is that it is actually surprisingly slightly less accurate than my AR-15s when it comes to mediocre ammunition. So when you're putting mediocre ammunition through it, it really doesn't like it. For whatever reason, I'm not sure why. It's possible that it was me, but I mean, I was shooting sub MOA with 5-round groups, so I know that I was doing my part at least. So I'm really surprised that the other groups were around 3 inches most of the time. My other guns will shoot them 2, 2.5, sometimes 1.5 MOA at 100 yards with a 5-round group. So I was very surprised that this guy does not like those ammunitions, but again, it's a DMR. And if you're going to be shooting at long range, I think Texas Plinking has a video taking it out to 750 yards. So it's definitely capable. You put the right ammunition to it and it's going to do the work for you. So that is pretty much it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace off.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. What are you still doing here? The video's over. Wait. Why are you still here? Like, share, and subscribe. Or don't. The choice is yours. But if you do subscribe, thanks. And I like pizza. Peace off.